Greetings all, and welcome back to Fort Irwin, where we are now going to have an entire change of pace and delve a little into history and heritage. I have come up the hill to the Horse Detachment. Sitting to my immediate right is the Detachment Commander Captain Richards and his NCO in charge, Sergeant First Class Stemple. And before asking the really obvious questions, I would just like to observe the incredibly snazzy, that's got to be the best workday uniform in the Army. I mean, you got the boots, you got the buckles, you got the jeans and the shirt and the hats. I mean,
well, a lot of it has to mimic the mission set that we have, sir. So a big part of our job is community relations and recruiting. So when we wear events out in public like this shirt, we're usually going to sometimes rodeos or a more Western event. So we designed a Western uniform to kind of appeal to those people that we were talking to and recruiting. But our Western shirts, instead of being covered with brand names like Wrangler and Cinch, they're covered with our colors. So we got our U.S. Army and our battle flag over here, and we got the Blackhorse on our other shoulder, so everyone knows who we are and what we represent. And the jeans and the boots are just a practical part of the uniform that you wear when you work with horses every day. But there's special significance to the belt buckles that we wear. Part of joining this team is earning every step of the way, earning your way onto the team, earning your way onto a horse. And then once you show demonstrated a riding proficiency to where you can ride in public, you earn your belt buckle. So when you go out in public, people can know who you represent.
well, okay, on to business. First question is, in today's resource-strapped army, where we're shuffling recruiting shortfalls and the armor units are going around with three-man tanks and so on, why do we need a horse detachment?
Well, really, we need a horse detachment now more than ever, sir. So one of the big motivating factors behind soldiers' work ethics in the Army today is their ties to their unit through the course of history. If I believe in the unit that I'm in and what they've done in the past, it empowers me to want to make that same effect and do great things for its future. And the Blackhorse Regiment has a very storied past. Everything from doing the last horse-mounted cavalry charge in U.S. Army history to standing up the last cavalry camp in U.S. Army history, to now being the measuring stick that the Army measures itself against out in the box. So having the horse detachment to demonstrate the dawning of that history and some of the most significant moments in our regiment's history helps give a direct tie to soldiers so that they can embody the values and the discipline and what it really means, the spirit of a true Black Horse trooper.
So what are the day-to-day duties, other than keeping the horse? I mean, okay, we'll talk about the day-to-day duties of the horse keeping in a little bit, but what are the functions that your detachment provides?
You want to talk mission statement?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So part of our mission set is we conduct military ceremonies. So to maintain that tie of history, they get to see us on Fritz Parade Field when we're conducting a squadron or higher level military ceremony, change of command, change of responsibility. We also are very heavily engaged in community relations events and Army recruiting efforts. So we travel publicly all up and down the West Coast, all the way as far east as we've been in Colorado, we've been in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. We've operated in those areas all the way out to California here. And we've conducted 75 to 100 events a year where we're engaging with the community. We are working with recruiters in regional areas to bring positive attention to the Army and draw people in to see this is an organization rich in history and heritage. We are maintaining and honoring that history and heritage. And there are some really cool, unique opportunities if you make it into the Army.
So do you get a stipend from Recruiting Command to help you attend these events like rodeos or whatever?
The recruiters support us by having the recruiters themselves show up to the events that we go to. So we're the big flashy thing that helps attract and generate that interest for a potential recruit. And then we make that handoff of, oh, you want to learn more about who we are and what this is, talk to this recruiter here. And we make that handoff, and then the recruiter handles from then on integrating that person into the Army and hopefully setting them to boot camp.
Okay, so practical issues. If you guys aren't all 19 Deltas, I'm going to be very disappointed.
We're not. We actually recruit MOS immaterial. So we take on people not even from just inside our regiment of all different MOSs, but actually now we take volunteers from all across post. So we have people from operations group and from the 916th Support Brigade. They're now allowed to send soldiers over to us to join the Black Horse Regiment, transfer across post to serve on the Horse Detachment.
And do you have to know one end of a horse from the other before you apply?
No, that's actually that's a unique thing about this organization. The way we're modeled is based on the reality that most people that come to us and volunteer have never even touched a horse before. So we're taking a trooper that has come from, the 19 Delta, 19 Kilo, 11 Bravo, I'm a 12 Bravo, all walks of life in the Army, coming over here with interest and motivation to learn. And we're sending them through a crash course of the Horse 101, the old days of the Cavalry. This is the front end, that's the back end, that's how you feed it. And then we train. And we put in 4 to 6 hours of training a day, structured training 4 days a week, in order to meet that threshold of training aptitude to be safe and proficient on a horse. So we're covering all these multiple disciplines that we talked about, going from I don't know what a horse is to now I'm jumping it, shooting off of it, engaging with saber targets, complex tasks within a 2-year period. We only get people for 2 years.
Okay, well, we've done enough sitting down here chatting, I think. Why don't we go around and have a little bit of a show and tell? Right, luxury horse accommodation. Nothing but the finest for your finest troopers.
Nothing but the finest for the finest in the land. So right here we have Preston. Preston is actually a Mustang, and he's only 5 years old right now. And he's one of the newest horses to our program, but he's already operating at a level for an intermediate or an advanced rider to ride him comfortably. And Preston here, who loves people because he's at the very end of our stalls. Right now he's chowing down on some grain, which we give our horses at the end of every training day to help restore calories. That's your still nutritious, but mostly high in fat, high in protein, high in carbs, dietary supplement to accompany and supplement the hay that we give them every day, which is where they get the majority of their nutrition from. And we manage our feed by using these feed charts that's actually on every single horse's stall. And this just allows us to, whoever is on feed crew, as it changes throughout the week, they can walk up to the stall and know exactly how much food they need to give the horse every single day and at what frequencies. So we do what's called pulse feeding our horses. So we feed them once in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, which is a couple hours before we start our training, which gives the horses enough time to digest all of their food before they engage in physical activity, just like we would want. And then we feed them again at the end of the day, which is usually around 16:30 for us, or 4:30 in the afternoon. And that way they have food to last them overnight until we come in the following morning to feed them. And then every single morning, every single day of the week, whether it's a working day or not, feed crew comes in, they clean out all of the stalls for the horses during a working week. All of the team members come in to clean the stalls, and that's how we maintain our horses' wellness throughout the day. But the first thing we do when we come in the morning, you're going to your stall and you're taking care of your horse. The horse always comes first.
I'm noticing a lack of air conditioning.
So there is no air conditioning out here, but we do have shade for the horses when we get into hot summer months. And when summer rolls around, we actually have misters, which is essentially a rubber hose that runs along the top of all of these stalls, and then it releases a mist, cool water down to the horses that they attach to right out here. And that helps regulate the horse's body temperature throughout the summer. So they can stand in the shade of their stall, get that cool water to help regulate the body temperature.
Yeah, Fort Irwin doesn't strike me as being a natural habitat for a horse. 105 degrees every day for a month.
The horses are pretty well accustomed to it, but we work around that schedule for them. In the hottest summer months, we will actually come in early in order to ride the horses before the hottest part of the day happens. So this guy right here is Blue Duck. He's earned the nickname Blue Buck recently because he's had a little energy in him, but he's another young horse that we've acquired recently. And he's actually a quarter horse. He's not a Mustang. The majority of our herd is quarter horses. We have 15 horses in total, and we have 4 Mustangs and then 11 quarter horses in our herd. And he's just one of the youngest ones. Most of the horses that we have, they do have a historical name or some kind of tie-in. So Preston, that paint Mustang that we had down at the end, he's actually named after a member of the Fort Carson Horse Detachment that passed away in recent years. So we honor that individual who was a friend to our team by naming a horse after them. Wickham right here is another name that has significant meaning. So Jerry Wayne Wickham was a soldier who served in the Blackhorse regiment in Vietnam, and he died in Vietnam, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor. So we named this horse after him. And Wickham, the horse, is one of our most highly athletic horses. He is the fastest, and he's always so eager to please his rider. But he's an absolute workhorse and an amazing athlete. And when I was at Nationals last year, I had the chance to meet the person, Jerry Wayne Wickham's best friend, a Vietnam veteran. And we exchanged stories. I talked about the horse. He talked about the Medal of Honor recipient. And we were amazed at how many characteristics
they had the same.
that soldier and that horse had in common. And it it was a very touching moment that means a lot.
I'm looking at the markings. It's got 2 star at the front and 2, 2, 3 at the back.
Yes, so actually let's show this off on Debbie here. Can you just have her face that way for me for a minute? I'm going to talk about the prison tats. Oh, yeah. So the majority, all of our quarter horses in our program, with the exception of Scout, come from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. So they come to us with what we call the prison tats, but these are actually the brands that they're given as part of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Agriculture Program. So you can kind of see there's a star on Debbie's shoulder here, and that star is just the Texas prison brand. And then she's given the number to denote her year of birth. And then there's a code on her back hip here, and this is to denote her dam or her mother. And then there's another brand on her rump over here that is for her sire or her father. And that's what all of the numbers and brands on our horses mean. And here we have Chief, and Chief was actually named after Chief Warrant Officer Brent Ray, who was the chief back in the early days of our horse detachment, so we're talking early 2000s. And Chief Ray was responsible for building the barn that's behind us. He was responsible for making these stables built and happening, so he's considered one of the founding fathers and probably the godfather of our horse detachment. So our program will always have a horse named Chief in honor of him, and he's still around. It's not a memorial horse.
Yeah.
He's still
Chief
around.
seems to have an appetite anyway.
Chief does have an appetite. And next to Chief, we have Rosie. So Rosie was named after Rosie the Riveter. And Rosie kind of has a reputation. She's a red mare. Anyone who's a horse person and watches this video will understand that without any further description. But she can be a little moody at times, but she's an amazing.
Like Irish redheads. Yeah,
Possibly,
right.
possibly.
Yeah, right.
But I will show, when we feed our horses hay every morning and every night, we actually have these little doors that we open here.
Oh.
And they throw hay into feed buckets that are right here. And that gets cleaned out once a month just to keep that feeding area sanitized for the horses. And that just allows us easy access. All right, we'll head up to the upper stalls. You can see that in addition to the stalls the horses are in, this is probably what's most important about how we keep our horses. They have these runs on the back of their stall where they can stretch their legs and they can actually run back and forth up and down their stalls, which they will do as a herd sometime. And this is also their opportunity to kind of see all of the other horses in the herd, socialize, maybe nip at each other over the railings, but this is where they get to be in a group, see each other, and feel comfortable. And it's also where we usually find them napping. One of the jobs of NTC is to send a field officer of the day down here to check up on the horses and make sure everything's going well. And their emergency contact for a horse in distress is me.
Yeah.
So I get plenty of calls saying, "Oh, I think some of your horses are dead," and we come down here and they're just sleeping. They're just taking little cat naps every afternoon. So this is Bradley. He's one of the ones that you saw in the arena, and he is the reigning national champion. So he is the running national champion horse for 2 years in a row now. So the trophies and the plates and the ribbons prove that this is, as of right now, the best horse in the United States Cavalry.
But does he have an AAM?
He doesn't have an AAM, but he has First Sergeant as rider, which is a better award for him. So right now you can see Sergeant Swink administering medicine to Charger, who's one of our horses that's currently getting a horse version of ibuprofen for a sore back. And that just comes from, being used in the McClellan saddle. The McClellan saddles that we use, like I said, were made to the specifications of the original cavalry saddle. But horses back in those days were much narrower and much smaller. The horses we have today, taller and wider. So we use saddle pads with extra cushion and extra support to help mitigate that. But still some horses, after extended use with that more narrow McClellan saddle, they'll have signs of soreness. So we just call the vets, they come out, do an examination, and then they prescribe medicine to help treat those horses, make them more comfortable, so we can continue to use them in the program. And this is Chance. He's my currently assigned horse. And
So you get to ride as well. You're not just an administrator.
you cannot, so it's the same as a tank commander, right? Like if I'm a commander in an armor unit, I cannot command from behind a desk. I have to be in the vehicle commanding my formation. The same applies here. You have to command this formation from horseback. And while that means that I'm not necessarily the best rider, It does mean that I get in the saddle like everybody else, and I lead the formation, and I go through mounted drills, and I participate in the competitions just like everybody else does. In fact, this year when we did the Rose Parade, which was the biggest notoriety event that we had ever done, it was myself, my first sergeant, and one of our senior riders that went down to ride in that parade with that massive crowd there. So everyone works here, everyone rides. This is Blackjack. Blackjack is named after General Blackjack Pershing, Brigadier General Blackjack Pershing, who was the leader of the punitive expedition to eliminate Pancho Villa. And this is where we had the final charge of the 11th Cavalry on the Ojo Azules in 1916. It was on Blackjack Pershing's orders that Major Howes took a detachment of soldiers down to Ojo Azules. They crossed 36 miles of mountainous terrain overnight on intelligence that Pancho Villa was at the Ojo Azules. And they arrived just at daybreak, and they came onto the field and they were discovered by scouts. So 114 mounted soldiers from the 11th Cavalry Regiment charged in, guns blazing, sabers rattling, bugle calling commands, officers shouting orders, and they were able to get 42 confirmed kills. They captured about 70 horses, and they didn't lose a single soldier. When Major Howes, who led that charge, was writing his correspondence back to Brigadier General Blackjack Pershing, he wrote that despite many soldiers getting bullets ripped through their clothes, they didn't lose a single soldier, and they only lost a few horses.
All right, enough about the horses and their living conditions. What do you actually do with them, though? Well, this. All right, we have a fine specimen of Blackhorse trooper here modeling the historic uniform. Now, of course, theoretically or traditionally, when you think U.S. Army Cav, you think the John Wayne movies with the darker blue top, the lighter blue trousers, the black hat. That's not what we got. What do we got here?
Right here we have the 1898 U.S. Army uniform. This was used around the time of the Spanish-American War. And you can see that he's wearing his blue, what would traditionally be a chambray shirt, with his khaki canvas pants. He's wearing the original cavalry belt along with this. Now this belt, if you'll do a half left for me, you're on your military left. So the cartridges that go around this belt are actually designed to carry the carbine rounds for the rifle that's strapped to the side of the horse. He's wearing a pistol on his right hand hip because in the days of the old cavalry, you would control your horse with both reins in the left hand, and you would use your right hand to draw your weapon and shoot from horseback.
I mean, I would have thought it would be...
You want to demonstrate how you pull it out? That's simple.
Now, why would he do it that way and not just a more regular traditional draw that we'd have today?
So when you're sitting on the horse, you're kind of sitting at an angle here, and the cut of the holster allows it to rest more comfortably against your hip as you're in a seated position. If you had it the other way with the barrel forward, it would be flapping up against your leg, and it would be more awkward to manipulate.
Okay, so we saw in the demonstration, you fired your 6 rounds going one way, you turned around, and you fired another 6. You obviously didn't do a speed reload.
No. So historically, a lot of ways to carry spare guns, cavalry would mount holsters on their pommel of their saddle, and they would try to get as many guns going into battle as possible, of course with only 6 rounds. I kind of rigged it up so I just kind of tucked one in my belt here. We have various methods we do that when we do our shooting competitions. It's about being able to quickly and efficiently snatch that second gun out and get it ready to go as you're making that turn. So I find the holsters on the saddle are flopping everywhere while I'm trying to ride, and they're hard to get to. So
it really is an individual preference.
Right there, yes sir, it is.
All right, so the other famous thing, of course, we had the brown hat, not the black hat.
Yes, this is the brown campaign hat, which was used in the cavalry. It's much more comfortable when you consider being out in the desert sun all gosh darn day. And this actually came around before the black campaign hat. So originally the campaign hats were brown, and they're used not just with cavalry units, which are all using black hats today. The 11th Cavalry is the only cavalry unit left in the Army that wears the brown Stetson, the brown campaign hat. All the other cavalry units wear the black ones. And the brown campaign hat is also used by drill sergeants now today at basic trainings across the country.
Although different shape.
Different shape.
The Montana
flat
hat,
brim.
they call it. All right, so I mean, you're wearing a shirt, exposed. It's grey. I'm not wearing a shirt. I'm a little bit chilly. I'm wearing the jumper and the shirt now. What do you wear when it's cold? I mean, really cold.
So when it gets cold, we have our khaki issued field jacket, and you can see we have photos up in the barn. I have the guys that originally issued those going to the Philippines. I can't even imagine how hot that would be out there. But when it is cold, we have the big overcoat wool jacket that matches the tone.
The same color as the bottom? Okay, so it's actually some form of camouflage. The Army has understood brown actually is good.
A little bit, yes, and they are quite warm, so.
A cavalry trooper in 1901 was issued 3 different tops. They were issued this blue chambray undershirt, which they would wear for their regular daily duties, and they would wear during very hot climates. That's actually why this was one of the only uniforms that actually had the rank on the undershirt, so they could downgrade to it during hot climates. They were also issued the tan overcoat for when they went out into the field, and they were issued an additional blue jacket that they would put on for a more dress occasion or ceremonies like parades.
Are you wearing historical underwear?
No comment.
All right. I don't know how dedicated they are to the cause, but with all, so I mean, is the material actually comfortable? I mean, I presume back then serviceability was more important than anything else.
I would say it's a little bit more comfortable than my modern dress uniform, save for the shoes. The shoes are not comfortable at all. But other than that, it's not too bad once you get used to it.
So those are shoes, they're not full-on boots?
They are not full-on boots. They go right about to the ankle there. They are marching shoes. These are very close to how they were originally made. You've got no arch support in these. They are very flat, very stiff.
So they didn't have cav boots. Your concession to being on a horse are the puttees, basically.
Yes.
An interesting fact about these shoes is they also don't have any kind of textured sole on the underside. It's hard rawhide and it's very slippery. And when you combine that with the stirrup on the horse, which is just wood and nothing else, you've got yourself not a lot of purchase when you're in the saddle, which makes things interesting. So we've augmented some of ours. We'll use skateboard tape to help us stay in the saddle when we're in competitive mode. But traditionally they would find tar or some other kind of textured makeshift material that they would add to their stirrups in order to have better traction when they're going into a campaign.
All right, there's an old cavalry term for your priorities of work. It's the horse, saddle, the man. So you take care of the horse first, then you take care of the saddle, and then you take care of yourself. These days, you change that to your vehicle, your equipment, like your personal weapons, whatever, and then yourself. Well, we've seen the horses, we've seen the man. Now it's time to talk about the saddle. I am a man of surprisingly great knowledge, but even I draw the line at US military saddles. So Sergeant Stemple, talk me through this. What are we looking at?
All right, so this is a kind of overall snapshot of what an individual trooper would carry on his mount. So kind of in the history of the cavalry, they were made to be highly mobile, cover a lot of distance in a short period of time, so they traveled light. They just kept enough of what they needed to get into the fight, get the trooper to that dismounted fighting location, and then take care of himself and his horse. So pretty light pack. What we have here is the 1892 McClellan saddle. Now this is a little bit of variation, as we talk about this, a little bit of variation in make and model of what was issued across the formation over history. And you kind of look at a comparative to today's military. When I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, I had a combination of BDUs and then DCUs and then ACUs, and before you know it, you're just kind of a hodgepodge of various evolutions of uniforms and equipment. So they had a comparable thing in this time frame. So there's a lot of evolution happening in the McClellan saddle to kind of modernize it to what is happening with the current fight. On this saddle, they would strap a bedroll. So the bedroll is just going to consist of a rolled canvas outer shell with a wool blanket on the inside. Sometimes they take some additional uniform items and personal effects and roll it into the bedroll to just have enough to change your socks and drink your water and move on. You'd also have a set of saddlebags. These small saddlebags, they're a little bit larger for the cavalry, but they don't hold a lot of large items. So the saddlebag would primarily carry some basic rations. It would have mostly items for your horse. So a brush, it would have a hoof pick, your spare horseshoes and nails in case you lost a shoe while you're on campaign. You can get that repaired and keep moving, because it's kind of like you got to keep a spare tire in your vehicle. Same concept for your horse. Some of the other things that we have on here, we do have a surcingle. So a surcingle was a secondary method of holding the saddle onto the horse beyond the main cinch. This will go all the way around. In a pinch, this could be pulled off and used as a breast collar that would go around the front to help hold the saddle on in difficult terrain. Continuing with individual soldier kit. So at this point in time, your primary was going to be your carbine. This would hang on the right side of the horse. So this is actually, it ranged from 1892 to 1899, Craig Jorgensen 3040 bolt action. And I can pull this out, you can get a good look at it. So this is pretty typical of what they would have carried in that time. 5-round capacity, side load. You could load 5, close the magazine, and then cycle on a straight bolt. This was an advantage as we moved on from the sharps and having a trap door. So you could hold more rounds in the weapon system. It was a little bit more reliable, but again, this was an interim weapon while we moved into World War I. So it wasn't in service very long. But, this was, at this point in time, troopers were moving to a fight, dismounting with a carbine and fighting on foot. Now, they still carried, in our time frame, there was a couple different weapons carried. There was a .38 caliber revolver. Now, what we found that they went back to, especially in the Philippines, just due to the terrain, getting through the jungle, and then the combatants being
somewhat drugged up, if I recall.
Yeah, a little bit drugged up. It was a little bit more difficult to effectively put them down with 38. So they actually ended up going back to the Colt Single Action Army and a 45 Long Colt. So we do run essentially reproductions of the original Colt 45, and we shoot from the ground, shoot from the horse. The horses are trained to accept gunfire, and this is your alternate weapon. And then lastly, at one point in time, this was the primary, now it's kind of your tertiary, is the 1860 Light Cavalry Saber. So this is a reproduction that is very, very close to the size, shape, and weight of what was used in that time. Something that was a little bit accurate to the period in the Civil War. A lot of these were mass-produced and pushed out without being sharpened. Part of that was time. Another part of that was logistics. So in that time, in order to sharpen a saber, they had to have a great big sharpening stone. And that was usually a big wheel on a pedal or something like that. If they're kind of production, maintaining these at an organizational level outside of having maybe just an individual stone or something like that in your pack, it was kind of difficult to maintain this. So when you're on the move and you're going over terrain and you have all your primary supply and equipment in a wagon train, they're going to dump those big heavy items that are difficult to get around. So it kind of worked out. There was still a good effectiveness from the mounted engagements, because you have 1,000 pounds or better of horse going behind your strikes, and you could still be pretty lethal with it. A little less so on the ground, but 1,000 pounds of horse will push this through whatever you point it at.
So not knowing anything about saddles at all, is there a difference in the basic design of a military saddle versus let's say a cavalry saddle?
So this, there's a little bit of difference, and you'll see like parts of this saddle have
influence. You have a pommel that you would wrap your reins around, for example.
Yeah, so there's no horn on this. On a modern Western saddle, you would have a horn. Up here, you just have a clean pommel. Part of this was for the way you would be stowing and carrying equipment. So in some cases, if I had a rain jacket or overcoat, I could roll it up kind of the same way that I have my my blanket or my bedroll in the back. I could roll it up and strap it to the front. So these are rigged where you have staples or rings on either side where you can hook up various equipment all the way around the saddle, including there's a post underneath here in the back that kind of holds on the saddlebags, and then they string through the staple to hold on to the saddle. But it was designed to be minimalist. So, you know, McClellan went and took a lot of inspiration from European cavalry. So they were looking at the Polish, they were looking at French, the Germans, a lot of people who had a lot of history of successful horse-mounted cavalry came back, took kind of the best of all these pieces and redesigned what became the U.S. cavalry saddle. So it is very minimalist. It's basically just a tree wrapped in very little, as little leather as possible to keep it covered and protected, to reduce weight and also create breathing efficiency for the horse, because you know you're moving over a long distance. You don't want your horse to get too hot, so there's more breathing room on this. Now,
Is it comfortable for the troop?
well, you get used to it. It wasn't necessarily designed to be comfortable for the troop. It was, like many things in the military, designed to be mass-produced. So it was kind of a one-size-fits-all 12-inch seat. At that time, in the peak of the cavalry, they were selecting horses that were very comparable in their shape and conformation. So it was a little bit more of a universal size on a universal horse. Nowadays, we have all sorts of shapes and sizes and breeds of horses, and the whole one-size-fits-all doesn't really fit so well. So, you know, we use some modern pads and modern technology to kind of help remedy that for the horse. And there are modernized shapes to this to fit, you know, modern breeds of horse.
So I'm looking at the stirrups, really high-tech wooden blocks.
Yeah. So these are, you have a very basic strap that hangs straight off of the tree. Your stirrup leathers come down and then go into a hooded stirrup. So it is wood. You know, maybe not anything fancy or excessively comfortable, but you did have a hooded stirrup. The point of this is to kind of guard your foot from snagging on brush and debris and objects as you're riding through any such terrain, and this allows it to glance off and continue moving.
All right, anything else that I missed?
I think that's about it. It's all, you know, the hard part is figuring out where everything goes and putting it on in the correct sequence, because once you get on your horse, you'll figure it out pretty quick when you're trying to move around and things aren't where they should be. But that takes a lot of time, is learning how to rig up your own kit and put it in the right spot. It's kind of like comparative to a modern soldier, you know, a young trooper going on their first ruck march.
Trying to set up the TA-50.
And they don't know how to pack their ruck right, and they go on that first ruck and they're realizing that they made a few mistakes. So this is what I would say is a very close comparison to that. You know, like learning how to master the rigging of your equipment is going to make everything else much easier.
What's the future of this detachment? Are we just more of the same?
Well, I think, you know, we're hoping to continue to enhance our technical proficiencies, grow the organization as the need for a recruiting tool for the Army continues to grow. You know, I hope that we're able to sustain this to maintain the rich history of the regiment and of the cavalry. And, you know, hopefully we can continue to also represent the Army in the equestrian world. So there is a large variety of events in the equestrian industry, and it's always an interesting thing to see the Army show up, and a lot of people don't expect it, and it's always a treat. So,
Right, well, I think we'll call it that. Thanks very much for your time and educating me about things that are a little bit beyond my area of normal knowledge.
all right, thank you.
Take care. Now, if you were particularly interested by this episode, well, as you can imagine, we edited a lot of the interviews down. You interview somebody for like 2 hours and you actually only use 5 minutes. Well, the director's cut, shall we say, of these videos is interviews 3, 2. If this particular topic interests you more than most, Well, you may have noticed that we edited these videos down. So an interview might take an hour, but we'll only use 5 or 10 minutes of footage. That's the way these things go. But if you want, shall we say, the director's cut of these interviews with more detail and length, hop over to the Patreon channel and you can find them there. So you take care of your horse first, then you take care of the saddle, and then you take care of your surf. Surf? Yo, surf, come here.
You're too far back.
Squire, come service me.